At exactly 9:13 a.m., the door to room 207 opened. A heavy trench coat, black as night, brushed the tile floor. Behind it, a boy. He stepped inside like it was any other day, except today he wasn't carrying a backpack. He was carrying something else, a stolen hunting rifle, fully loaded. He looked at the class, his classmates, people who barely noticed he existed, and then he smiled. Text on screen, inspired by true events. But before we dive into the details of the story, kindly drop in the comment section the location you are watching from and push the subscription button for notification on captivating and interesting stories on Chase Studio series. Now let's continue with the story. His name was Ethan Myles, 17 years old, a quiet shadow who drifted through the halls of Red Lake Valley High. He wasn't popular. He wasn't hated. He wasn't even feared. He was invisible, transferred in junior year. Nobody asked why. Nobody cared. Teachers called him smart but disengaged. But Ethan was watching, listening, waiting. At home, things were colder than the snow-covered street he lived on. His father had left when he was 9. His mother worked double shifts at a nursing home, barely present. Ethan ate dinner alone, did homework alone, laughed alone, when he did at all. What filled the void were forums, dark ones, places where hate was currency and violence was power. There, he wasn't invisible. He was praised. The signs were there. He wore the same dark coat every day, even in 80-degree heat. He sketched guns in the margins of his assignments. He wrote essays about feeling like a ghost in a world of noise. A girl in gym class once overheard him whisper, "They'll remember me." She thought he was being edgy. Another student, Riley, noticed Ethan's locker had no decorations. Just a single photo taped inside, Columbine shooters. He told a counselor once that he was numb all the time. They marked it down as teen angst. He went back to class. Nobody followed up. 3 days before the shooting, Ethan made a list. It wasn't homework. It was names. His notebook read, Room 207, Monday, 9:13 a.m. First target, Trevor, then Jamie, then whoever. On Sunday night, he cleaned his father's old hunting rifle, hidden behind the furnace in their basement. He loaded 3 rounds, practiced. That same night, he posted in an anonymous forum, "Tomorrow is freedom." No one reported it. No one knew it was him. Monday morning started like any other, except it wasn't. Ethan wore his trench coat, skipped breakfast, left a note on the kitchen table for his mom. "I'm sorry you couldn't see me." He walked to school in silence. At 8:50 a.m., he stood outside room 207. Watched the students file in. At 9:13 a.m., he opened the door. The room was filled with idle chatter, rustling papers, and the sound of a fan humming against the morning heat. Trevor Lawson was laughing at a meme on his phone. Jamie Lynn was finishing her math worksheet. Mr. Daly, the substitute teacher, was calling attendance. Ethan stepped in, calm, focused. His hands gripped the rifle tightly, almost gently. He didn't say a word. He raised the rifle and fired. Trevor fell, blood on the floor. Panic erupted. Students screamed and dove under desks. Jamie froze, paralyzed. Mr. Daly lunged toward Ethan. Mr. Daly collapsed. Ethan turned to the door and locked it, then looked back at the classroom. "Now you see me." He raised the rifle again, aimed at Jamie, paused, and for a moment, just a second, his hands trembled. Jamie whispered, "Please." "I'm sorry." He didn't fire. He lowered the rifle. Then the fire alarm went off. Somebody had pulled it from the hallway. Ethan turned his head. That second was all it took. A student, Darnell Green, leapt at him from behind, 17 years old, football captain, brave. They struggled. The rifle clattered to the floor. Ethan screamed. A third shot went off. Hit the wall. Chaos again. Students fled. The door was unlocked. Ethan was tackled by two students, pinned. He didn't fight. He smiled again. 3 minutes, 3 lives, a forever scar. Ringing phone, dispatcher tone, sirens faintly in the background. 911. Dispatcher. 911, what's your emergency? Student, panicked, sobbing. He has a gun! He shot Mr. Daly! Oh my God! Room 207, please hurry! Dispatcher. Stay on the line. Officers are on their way. Are you in a safe place? Within 90 seconds, the first call reached dispatch. 4 minutes later, the first officer was on site. Red Lake Valley High went into full lockdown. Officers entered room 207, weapons drawn, only to find a boy on the ground pinned under 2 bloodied students. And a rifle? Empty. Officer shouting. Suspect secure. Request medical. We have casualties. EMTs shouting, stretchers rolling in. Trevor Lawson was declared dead on scene. Mr. Daly died en route to the hospital. A third student, Ana Perez, was shot through the shoulder, but survived. In the chaos, Darnell Green was hailed as a hero. 17 years old. He stopped a massacre with his bare hands. He walked out bruised, but alive. News anchors. We're live outside Red Lake Valley High School, where tragedy struck this morning in what officials are calling a targeted school shooting. Across the country, headlines exploded. Teen kills 2 in high school shooting. Substitute teacher among the dead. Motive unclear in Red Lake shooting. Parents stormed the school parking lot, desperate for answers. Survivors were loaded onto buses, hands trembling, eyes empty. Some students never made it out. Some would never forget the sound of that first shot. In homes across America, families turned to their screens, trying to understand what drives a teenager to bring war into a classroom. And one face kept flashing on screen. Ethan Myles, the interrogation. Detective, tired voice. Why'd you do it, Ethan? He didn't cry, didn't beg, just stared into the table, hands cuffed. Ethan. They didn't see me. I made them look. Detective. You could have walked away. Ethan. So could they. Every day. They walked past me. He spoke about the forums, the messages that told him he mattered, how killing would make them remember. It wasn't revenge. It was erasure. He wanted to erase the feeling of being nobody. Jamie Lynn, shaking. He looked right at me. I thought I was dead. Jamie couldn't sleep for weeks. Her parents pulled her from school. She speaks in soft, uncertain sentences now. Darnell Green. I just moved. I didn't think. I just moved. He was offered college scholarships, news interviews, awards. But behind the smiles, he carried something else. Darnell, quiet. He smiled after we stopped him. That messed me up the most. That smile. America reacted the way it always does. Flags at half-mast. Vigils with candles shaped like hearts. Social media hashtags, #, Red Lake Strong politicians offered thoughts and prayers. The president addressed the nation. President, audio clip. We must do more to protect our children. No student should fear the classroom. But gun reform bills stalled. Again. A week later, a different school, in a different town, had a scare. It wasn't a shooting, but it could have been. The fear never really left. Red Lake Valley changed forever. The flags flew half-mast for weeks. 2 funerals in 2 days, black ribbons on lockers, grief counselors in every hallway. But how do you grieve when the killer sat in the same cafeteria? When he walked your streets? Laughed. Barely. With your kids? At Trevor Lawson's funeral, his mother screamed so loud it stopped the service. Mrs. Lawson, sobbing. He was just a boy? A good boy, why him? Jamie Lynn sat in the front row, her hands still trembling. Her therapist said it would take years to heal. She wasn't sure if she ever would. Darnell Green didn't go to either funeral. He locked himself in his room for 3 days. He saved lives, but couldn't sleep. Darnell, voiceover. I keep hearing the shot. I see Ethan's face, that smile. Parents pulled their kids out of Red Lake Valley High. Enrollment dropped by 40% in 1 month. The principal resigned. So did the school counselor who missed the signs. A group of mothers started a petition. Metal detectors for every door. Another group pushed for mental health screenings, monthly. They shouted over each other at school board meetings, but one voice stood alone. Mrs. Daly, widow of Mr. Daly. Are we fixing the locks, or are we fixing the loneliness? The local cafe where Ethan used to sit in silence now has a plaque that reads, "We see you. We hear you." Kids who never spoke to one another now sit in groups, ask how the other is doing, actually wait for the answer. Pain forced them together, but silence nearly destroyed them. And Ethan? He never appealed his sentence. He writes letters from prison, to no one in particular. One read, I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope one day someone sees the next me before it's too late. In the weeks after the trial, Ethan Myles began to write. Not emails, not posts, letters, on lined notebook paper in slanted, careful handwriting, to the families, to the classmates who never saw him, to Jamie, to Darnell. He never mailed them. They were found in a prison desk drawer after his transfer to a state facility. One letter read, Jamie, you said you were sorry. I don't know if I ever deserved that. I froze. Not because I cared, but because I realized I didn't want you to be like me. A ghost. I didn't pull the trigger. That was the only choice I got right. Another. To Mr. Daly's family, I watched him once. Stay late after school to help a student. I don't know why I remembered that. He was good. I hope you know that I do remember that. And the last one, unfinished. To Darnell, you could have run. You didn't. I think about that every night. I didn't know people like you existed. He signed every letter. I was there. I was wrong. E. They weren't apologies. They were echoes of a boy trying to explain himself to a world that no longer cared to listen. Jamie Lynn eventually read her letter. It took her 3 years to open it. She said it didn't bring peace, but it helped her understand that monsters aren't born. Sometimes they're made slowly, by silence, by absence, by us. As for Ethan, he remains in solitary. He never requested parole. He never asked for visitors, but every year on the anniversary of the shooting, a letter appears on the desk of Red Lake Valley High's new principal. Typed, anonymous, always ending the same way. Ask the quiet ones how they're doing. Mean it. Red Lake Valley High reopened 17 days after the shooting. But it was never the same. The classroom where it happened, room 207, was sealed off, eventually repurposed into a storage closet, but every student still walked past it like it whispered to them. Jamie Lynn returned to school, but she sat closer to the door now, flinched when lockers slammed, didn't speak unless spoken to. She used to be loud, smiley, debate team captain. Now, she just wanted to disappear. Some students transferred, others dropped out. A few posted tributes every year, but most just tried to forget. Darnell Green was given a medal, recognized at a school assembly. He stood at the microphone and said only this, Darnell, quietly. "Don't call me a hero. I just didn't want to see anyone else die." He never spoke about it again. The media moved on. The hashtags faded. The cameras packed up. But for the students who sat in room 207, time did not move on. It paused and stayed there. What happened in those 3 minutes didn't end when the gun was taken away. It just started a new kind of war, one inside their heads, one they were never trained for. Jamie's diary entry 1 year later read, "They say it gets better, but I don't want better. I want before." The trial of Ethan Myles began 6 months after the shooting. It wasn't televised, but it didn't need to be. Everyone in Red Lake Valley knew the script by heart. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, multiple counts of attempted murder, and use of a deadly weapon in a school zone. But the courtroom wasn't the only place people were asking questions. Parents demanded accountability. Why were the warning signs missed? How could someone slip through so many cracks? The school board launched an internal review. The counselor who'd once labeled Ethan's confession of numbness as teen angst resigned. When Ethan walked into court, he didn't cry, he didn't look around. He wore a plain suit, shackled at the wrists, and he still smiled. But not a proud smile, a lost one. Jamie testified. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. Jamie, voiceover. "He looked at me and paused. I don't know why he didn't shoot, but I still hear the shot anyway, in my head, every night." The defense argued mental illness, said Ethan had been failed by the system, that he needed help, not a cell. The prosecution argued calculation, premeditation, hate, the list in the notebook, the post that said, "Tomorrow is freedom." They asked the jury one question. Prosecutor, firmly, "What kind of freedom comes from killing your classmates?" It took the jury 4 hours. Verdict, guilty on all counts, sentenced to life without parole. No celebration followed, just silence. Because no sentence could rewind time, or bring back the dead, or erase the memory of a rifle raised in homeroom. Red Lake Valley High eventually reopened. Room 207 was turned into a counseling center. The walls were repainted, the desks replaced. But the air, it never felt the same. Jamie Lynn returned months later. She couldn't step into the room. She stood in the doorway, tears welling up, then turned and walked away. Students left notes on Trevor's locker. "I miss your laugh." You shouldn't be gone. Mr. Daly was honored with a plaque in the library. The town named a scholarship after him, but it felt small compared to the weight of what was lost. Ethan's trial made national news, but it was the aftershocks that defined the town. Parents questioned the school board at every meeting. Why weren't the signs taken seriously? Why weren't there counselors with real training? Why didn't someone stop it? And quietly, other students came forward. Kids who had been feeling what Ethan felt. Lonely. Forgotten. Red Lake Valley hired 3 new mental health staff. They started peer support groups, implemented anonymous tip lines, held assemblies not about punishment, but about pain, and how to talk about it before it boils over. Because Ethan Myles didn't just kill. He showed them what silence could cost, and in that broken silence, maybe something like healing finally began. The trial of Ethan Myles began 6 months later. The courtroom was overflowing, every bench filled with classmates, parents, teachers, ghosts. Trevor's mother sat in the front row. Her hands shook every time Ethan entered in cuffs. She never looked away. Jamie Lynn testified, voice trembling, hands fidgeting in her lap. She recounted the moment Ethan raised the rifle, the moment he didn't pull the trigger. Why had he hesitated? Why had he spared her? Ethan pled guilty to all charges. No trial by jury, no long defense, just one statement, read aloud by his public defender. Defense attorney, reading, "He didn't want freedom. He wanted to be seen. He regrets the pain. He understands the cost. And he will never ask for forgiveness." The judge didn't blink. He handed down a double life sentence, without parole. The courtroom exhaled. But it didn't feel like justice, just aftermath. In prison, Ethan was placed on suicide watch. He didn't speak to reporters, didn't write to his mother, didn't answer the letters from strangers, both hate and sympathy. His name became a whisper, his crime, a caution. In Red Lake Valley, time didn't stop after the shooting, but it staggered. Lockers were cleaned, desks were replaced. Room 207 was sealed off, for good. A memorial grew on the school lawn. Flowers wilted in the cold. Photos of Trevor and Mr. Daly, flickering candlelight. But grief turned bitter. Town hall meetings turned to shouting matches. Parent 1, "How did no one see this coming?" Teacher, "We reported red flags." The system did nothing. Parent 2, "Ban trench coats, ban the forums, ban the damn guns." Jamie Lynn never returned to school. Darnell Green stopped playing football. The principal resigned. One teacher quietly transferred districts, said she couldn't walk past room 207 without trembling. Ethan's mother moved out of town. She left behind his childhood photos, his notebooks, and a note to the community. "I'm sorry. I failed him. I failed all of you." No one replied. At the next graduation ceremony, there were 2 empty seats. Trevor's diploma was handed to his sobbing father. Mr. Daly's name was etched on a plaque near the school entrance, but the ceremony ended early. No one felt like celebrating. In the end, the bullet holes were patched. The blood was scrubbed. But the silence, it stayed. The town of Red Lake Valley wanted justice. No, needed it. The courthouse overflowed, not just with people, but with grief, rage, and questions. Reporter, "Ethan Myles, 17, faces 2 counts of first-degree murder and multiple counts of attempted murder." His trial began 6 months later. Ethan sat motionless as the charges were read. He pled guilty to all of them. No trial, no jury, just sentencing. But the town came anyway, because what they wanted was closure. What they got was something else. Jamie Lynn testified from a remote room. Her voice shook as she described the moment Ethan raised the rifle at her face, and then lowered it. Jamie, on screen, trembling. I still see his eyes. Not angry, not sad. Just nothing. Trevor's father refused to speak. His mother sobbed quietly from the front row, clutching Trevor's baseball glove. Mr. Daly's widow read a letter aloud. Mrs. Daly, reading, "My husband stood between that boy and our children. He died a hero. But I want to know who stood between that boy and his pain." The courtroom went silent. Then Ethan was asked if he had anything to say. He stood, and with the weight of 100 lifetimes in his voice, he whispered, "Ethan," barely audible. "I wanted to be seen, that's all." He sat down and said nothing else. The judge delivered the sentence. Judge Stern. 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, but no one clapped, no one cheered. because justice had been served, but the wound still bled. The trial was over. The cameras stopped flashing, but Red Lake Valley couldn't move on. Because how do you rebuild after the unthinkable? How do you walk into room 207 and teach algebra? Where blood once stained the tile. The district brought in grief counselors. They replaced desks, repainted walls, but trauma doesn't scrub off with bleach. Some students never came back. Others changed schools. Jamie Lynn stopped speaking for 2 months. Darnell Green quit football. Said every time he ran drills, he heard the third shot again. The town held vigils, candlelight services, moments of silence. But silence was what led to this. So a group of parents formed something new. The 913 Coalition. Named after the minute everything changed. Their mission: spot the shadows before they fall. Listen before it's too late. They lobbied for stricter gun storage laws, mandatory mental health screenings, anonymous student reporting systems. They swore this would never happen again. And in a small house at the edge of town, Ethan's mother cried alone. No interviews, no apologies, just grief. She never saw it coming. Didn't know what her son had become. Neighbor. She was always kind, just tired. We thought they were managing. They weren't. In the years that followed, room 207 became a symbol, not of death, but of how fragile we all are. When we choose not to see the one standing right in front of us. In the end, there were no clear answers, no manifesto, no great conspiracy, just a boy with a rifle, a broken mind, and a desperate need to be seen. Ethan Myles now sits in a maximum security psychiatric facility. No visitors, no parole. He's 25 now. He paints pictures of birds, says they're the only thing that knows what freedom is. Darnell Green received a state medal for bravery. He doesn't talk about it publicly. Jamie Lynn graduated with honors. She speaks at schools now, on silence, on fear, on what she calls the weight of almost. And Red Lake Valley High? Room 207 was never used again. They turned it into a counseling center, a place to talk, to listen, to see the kids who think no one notices. Every hallway has an Ethan, every class a Trevor, a Jamie, a Darnell. The question isn't how it happened, it's, will we notice before it does again? If you or someone you know is struggling, speak up. Help is real, and it matters. National Suicide Prevention. Lifeline 988. He walked into class with a rifle and smiled. But behind that smile was a scream, and we all heard it too late. If you enjoyed this episode of Chase Studio Stories, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us continue to share impactful and meaningful content.